Hey guys, Mr. O'Brien here. So in Module 2, Lesson 2, we're going to be looking at the flow of energy in an ecosystem. So our focus question for this chapter is how does energy flow through an ecosystem? So when we're talking about energy, we're talking about when something eats something, the energy is transferred from one to another. And if you remember, all of the energy on Earth, I should say most of the energy on Earth, comes from the sun. So how does the energy get from the sun to every living thing on planet Earth? So energy in an ecosystem is transferred in different ways or is obtained in different ways. Organisms differ in how they attain energy and how they are classified. So we have two different ones. We have our autotrophs, which make their energy. So in other words, these are one of the examples of an organism that makes their energy would be like plants, right? Plants use the sun in order to make energy from sunlight. We also have heterotrophs. And when we're looking at a heterotrophs, these are individuals that consume their energy. So in this picture here, we have two different organisms. We have our elk, and our elk is a type of organism or a type of consumer that eats plants. Whereas the wolf or the wolves, they are planning on eating the elk. So even though they are both consumers, they are both eating different things. So all the green plants and other organisms that produce their own food in an ecosystem are called primary producers, and these are called autotrophs. So a primary producer, a primary producer just necessarily refers to the fact that they are directly producing energy from the sun. So an autotroph is an organism that collects energy from sunlight and inorganic substances. In that case, it would probably be CO2 would be our inorganic substance. So we have our plants, and we can also have other things like algae, which perform photosynthesis. So organisms that contain chlorophyll, like trees, anything that has a green tint to it, they contain chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is what is absorbing the sunlight. And chlorophyll absorbs light energy during photosynthesis to use it to convert the inorganic substances in carbon dioxide and water to organic molecules. So if we take a look here, okay, we are taking CO2, we are taking water, and we are taking sunlight, and we are going through the process of photosynthesis in order to make a few things. We make oxygen and we make glucose, which in this case is our sugar. Now, in places where sunlight is not available, some bacteria use hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide to make organic molecules and to use it as food. So this is a picture of a hot spring in Yellowstone National Park. Now, this hot spring actually uses things that are different. It uses hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide. So when you see these colors, what you're seeing is a mixture of sulfur, which is the yellow, and also the bacteria that is breaking down these organisms. So another way that organisms obtain energy is by consuming or eating other organisms. So a heterotroph is an organism that gets its energy requirement by consuming other organisms. So heterotrophs are considered consumers, just like our individual here, which is eating and consuming the cricket. So we have three different types of heterotrophs. A heterotroph that eats only plants is called an herbivore. So again, only plants. So this is an example like a cow, a rabbit, or a grasshopper, only eating plant material. Now, heterotrophs that prey on other heterotrophs are called carnivores. So in other words, they are eating other things. Wolves, lions, lynx, these are all examples of things that only eat meat. And then finally, we have individuals that eat both plants and animals, and these are called omnivores. Bears, humans, even mockingbirds are individuals that eat both plants and animals. So if we take a look at this picture right here, so this picture is representing a wolf, which is a heterotroph, about to consume another heterotroph, the moose. So if we take a look at our wolf, right, our wolf would be a carnivore, meaning that it is eating the meat of the moose, whereas the moose would be an example of an herbivore. Now, remember, both of these organisms are consuming something else. They are just doing so in a slightly different way. So, again, those are the classifications that we have. So we also have detritivores. Now, a detritivore eat fragments of dead matter in an ecosystem and return nutrients to the soil. So the thing about a detritivore is it's slightly different than a decomposer. So even though these terms sometimes get used hand in hand, a detritivore is actually physically eating fragments of the dead matter. And again, it's returning those nutrients back. Worms and also some other aquatic insects are physically eating, whereas a decomposer, they actually break down dead organisms by releasing digestive enzymes. So this would be like our fungus. And when a fungus is actually eating, they release enzymes into whatever they are growing on, and that is how they break it down. They then re-ingest that digestive enzyme juice that is created from breaking that substance down. So here's a picture of a fungus on a log, right? This fungus is obtaining food energy from the dead log, and the fungi are decomposers that recycle materials found in the dead organism. So why are decomposers so important in an ecosystem? The reason that they are so important is without the presence and the activities of the detritivores and decomposers, organic material and nutrients cannot be recycled to other or available to other organisms. So in other words, the reason that we are so reliant on these decomposers is that they are recycling matter back into the ecosystem. And without that, remember, matter cannot be created or destroyed. So without that recycling of those nutrients, matter would not be available for anything else once it is used. So when we're modeling energy flow in an ecosystem, we often look at this in terms of how are these food webs and food chains connected. So to model the energy flow through an ecosystem, we build what's known as a food pyramid to help us model these interactions. So each step in a food chain or a food web is called a trophic level. So for example, the producers produce the energy from the sun. Those are then eaten by the primary consumers, who are then eaten by the secondary consumers, who are then eaten by the tertiary consumers, who are then eaten by the quaternary consumers. Each one of these levels is a trophic level. Now, at the bottom of a trophic level, that is where our autotrophs are found. Okay, these are the ones like plants that are making their own specific energy. Heterotrophs, which are organisms that are consuming their food, make up the rest of these levels on the food pyramid. So with exception of the first trophic level, which is our producers, organisms at each trophic level get their energy from the trophic level before it. So in this case, the rabbit gets its energy from the plants. The snake gets its energy from the rabbit, and the eagle gets its energy from the snake. So when we're looking at food chains, and I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, a food chain is a model that shows how energy flows through an ecosystem. So these arrows right here that you see connecting the different organisms. So for example, we have from the plant to the grasshopper, from the grasshopper to the mouse, and from the mouse to the snake. Those arrows always point in the direction the energy is flowing or who is getting the full belly. So the arrows always point to who is eating who, okay? So for example, the grasshopper is eating the plant. The arrow is pointing to who is doing the eating. And again, notice in a food chain is a systematic step-by-step from trophic level to trophic level. And the problem is that this isn't always how ecosystems interact. Feeding relationships usually are more complex than just a single food chain because most organisms feed on more than one species. A food web is a model representing the many interconnected food chains and pathways in which energy flows through a group of organisms. In other words, this shows all interactions in an ecosystem. So it's not just showing one oversimplified approach, it is showing all interactions. And if you take notice here, what you'll notice is that these arrows that we're looking at are pointing from multiple different or in multiple different directions. So as we are pointing in multiple directions, you notice that multiple things could eat a specific animal. So ecological pyramids is a diagram that can show the relative amount of energy, biomass, or number of organisms that are found at each trophic level. So that's key. It tells us energy available, biomass, which is the amount of mass or amount of organisms available, and the numbers of organisms at each trophic level. So this is important because in an energy pyramid or in trophic levels, only 10% of the energy ever moved to the next generation. So for example, if we start at our producers, only 10% of the energy available in the producers goes to the primary consumers. To the secondary consumers, only 10% of that energy goes to the next one, and so on and so forth. So this is really important when we're looking at the amount of biomass, and the total mass of living matter at each trophic level decreases at each trophic level. So in other words, we are reducing the amount of organisms at each trophic level as we go up because less energy is available. So the relative number of organisms at each trophic level also has to do with there is less energy available. So less energy, less organisms. This is why you see a lot less top predators than you do trees walking around a forest. So ecological pyramids are models used to represent trophic levels in an ecosystem. So what we want to do here is identify the process by which autotrophs at the bottom of the pyramid convert energy from the sun. So if we're taking a look at the bottom of the pyramid, this is occurring due to a process called photosynthesis. So in other words, the energy from the sun is converted by our plants. In this case, I'm just going to draw a tree. That is then eaten by our primary consumers. The primary consumers are eaten by the next trophic level, and so on and so forth. But photosynthesis is the process that makes energy available at the bottom of our food chain. So in summary, autotrophs capture energy from the sun or use energy from certain chemical substances to make food. Heterotrophs, including herbivores, which eat plants, carnivores, which eat animals, omnivores, which eat both, and detritivores, which eat dead matter, are all ways that consumers can get energy. A trophic level is a step in a food chain or a food web. And food chains, food webs, and ecological pyramids are all models used to show how energy moves through an ecosystem. So hopefully this helps you out. Again, this is lesson 2, how energy moves through an ecosystem. This is Mr. O'Brien, signing off.